Hello, I'm David Martin Davies. I'm the host of The Source on Texas Public Radio. Today we're continuing our vital conversation about youth success. This discussion will focus on how local nonprofits, organizations are fostering youth success in San Antonio. Our event today is part of a series of vital conversations made possible by the John L. Santikos Charitable Foundation, a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. Our panelists today include Patricia Mejia, Vice President of Community Engagement and Impact for the San Antonio Area Foundation. Patricia, welcome to The Source. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having us.
Also with us, Andrea Figueroa, Executive Director of the Martinez Street Women's Center. Andrea, it's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Karla Aguilar joins us, Development Coordinator and Interim Cultural Arts Coordinator for the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions. Karla Aguilar, it's great to have you.
Hi, David. Good afternoon.
And also with us is Ada Saenz, the COO of the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio. Ada Saenz, great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So in this pandemic, children have been directly impacted with what's happening with the response to COVID, trying to keep them and our communities safe. Schools closed and now they're reopening in some fashion. But one metric is showing us that we've got a problem. The three largest school districts here in San Antonio are reporting thousands of students are missing from the rolls. They're not showing back up. They're just gone. So what happened to these kids? Where did they go? Is this just lost in the COVID shuffle? Are they going to be part of a lost COVID generation? So we're calling this a vital conversation, and that is a deliberate word. This is vital. We're talking about a situation where all hands should be on deck. We should be worried. We should be concerned. We should be taking action about what we need to be doing right now to make sure that we don't leave kids behind in the COVID situation, in this pandemic, and then also moving forward, how we can emerge from the pandemic in a stronger situation with greater awareness of the challenges that many of our children, our community's children, they belong to each of us. How can we recognize what are the challenges in their lives? How can we help them succeed? And whatever that success looks like, that's up to them to determine. But we want to help each and every one of them to reach their fullest potential. So how do we do that? So vital means important, but right now it also means urgent. And we want everyone in the community to join the conversation as we want to get input. We got to crowdsource what is going on out in the community and how can we shepherd the resources that we have. That means collaboration. That means finding nonprofits that are fully engaged and that know these communities and know these families and how we can bring it all together. And at the center of that was the San Antonio Area Foundation and how they want to have these different sensors in the community informing them about what San Antonio needs and how they can be a role in delivering resources. So Patricia Mejia, if you could talk about what the San Antonio Area Foundation is doing right now.
Yeah, thank you. You've given just an incredible introduction to the issue. We recognize that the inequities that our young people were experiencing prior to the pandemic were really shameful. There are 2, 3 various different communities within our community. And I think because we pride ourselves in being a welcoming, sometimes those inequities are not so good to look at. And we sometimes glaze them over. But these women on this panel are really on the front lines and have been prior to the pandemic, looking at equity right at, in the eyes and saying, how can we do better? What is our moral obligation to ensure that every child in this city has equal opportunity? And really what the Area Foundation wanted to do with these conversations is to really hone in on what are the inequities and how can we build back better? How can we make sure that we're creating the collaborations, that we're providing the resources to all of the different entities that really touch young people's lives? We know it's not just nonprofits, it's not just school systems, You're seeing grandparents play critical roles in helping people get onto their Zoom classrooms. And so for us, it's about hosting a conversation to really look at the complexity that's before us when we're looking at making a young person successful, and really looking at it from an asset perspective. There are many negative things that we can talk about from the inequities that exist in our community, but there are also so many beautiful things that our community is rich in culture that we can really serve as a foundation. And these women are really on the front lines. I would say they were on before COVID, and now they've put on different armor to make sure. And we simply want to host this conversation to really drive attention to the wonderful work that they're doing.
The community can join us with questions and comments. There's a chat function on GoToWebinar. You can do it there, or you could also email us at thesource@tpr.org. Hopefully, what I want to encourage all of our guests is to try to communicate through story. If you could help us understand what you've seen working in your areas. You don't have to tell us precisely who it is that you're talking about. We can preserve their privacy. But if you could tell us a little bit about a journey that you've seen, and maybe a success, maybe a not success, close success, something that would help communicate to people listening, what are the challenges, what do we need to be doing, what can we do better? And so Karla Aguilar, I want to ask you, at the American Indians of Texas, at the Spanish colonial missions, if you could talk about, your community, why this is vital conversation is important to you.
Thank you, David. In our organization, American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions, right? It's a mouthful. Maybe many people may not know what the spectrum of our programs actually look like. We have 3 branches of programming, which include the indigenous arts, civic engagement, and a very multi-layered, integrative health and wellness programming, where a lot of our engagement with families across San Antonio takes place. All of our programming and services is open to all residents. They don't have to be from a particular tribal community or have to demonstrate, in tribal activity in order to be able to receive our programs and services. And so in our approach and why this conversation around youth is so incredibly important is that we integrate a philosophy that we call La Cultura Cura, or that culture heals. It is the invisible thread that works through all 3 branches of programming for the organization. And through particularly our male engagement work, we are seeking to be able to rebalance and really heal the infrastructure of our families across San Antonio. The way that we reach young people is using the same philosophy, but when a young person comes and participates in our program, their parents are also involved in classes and additional service provision that we offer, because we know that oftentimes it's compounded scenarios for a lot of these families where, they may be unemployed, they may have mixed immigration status. Illiteracy, is something that's so prevalent in our families as well. Language barriers and multiple different factors. And so in our programming here since the onset of the pandemic, we haven't been directly working with young people since. The majority of our work has been directly working with the parents. And so to be able to give an example of how our programming is so relevant and important in this time of great tension and uncertainty in households because of the poverty that exists is that our classes from our Healing the Wounded Spirit family violence prevention programming, which, obviously they have children, and so we're impacting, the child abuse rates and the domestic violence rates through these classes, that just at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 7 classes that were meeting face-to-face. Starting in 2 weeks, we will have 20 classes that are serving families digitally, we didn't know that the digital format was going to work for us to be able to reach more families. But the spike in folks seeking that kind of support, curriculum-based, evidence-based, as much as we can, to be able to provide tools for families to be able to hold it together while they're going through this process. Often these families completing these classes is contingent in their ability to be able to get their children back from CPS. And so really complex things that are happening behind the scenes that have to keep going. These families continue to need the support. And so while we're talking about young people and centering young people in the scenario, young people need to rest and be held in a sacred way by their family. And so the approach that our organization has is reintroducing this language of parenting, being fatherhood being sacred, that our children are sacred, our conversations with them are sacred, and being able to give them the tools to restore the family in that way through our various programs. And there's a whole spectrum of pieces. So I mentioned healing the wounded spirit, but for young people, the approach is the rites of passage program, right? And within that rites of passage, which is an integral part of our cultural experience as a people that has greatly been lost. Yes, there's quinceañeras and cotillions and so forth, but the process of transitioning from adolescence into adulthood, particularly in high trauma environments, there's a really key opportunity there to help a young person reroute themselves in their culture in order to be able to operate in a more harmonious way with their family and in community. But that's just a glimmer of how it is that our programming is creating solutions or trying to steer solutions in a new direction.
Ada Saenz at the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Antonio, what's been happening during the pandemic with how you interact with the youth there? I know that typically the kids, I know I did when I would go to the boys club after school and on weekends and play basketball and stuff. What happens? What's been happening there?
Sure. So the Boys and Girls Clubs in San Antonio, we serve kids ages 6 to 18, typically in after-school programming during the summertime. We say that when school is out, the clubs are in. So out-of-school time programming for youth in San Antonio, we're strategically placed in areas where kids need us most. So areas of high poverty, of high crime, and kind of desert areas where there are limited resources for kids and there's real safety issues for kids. And so we have traditional clubhouses where there are standalone clubhouses that kids come to be kids. And we are also, we partner with different school districts all across San Antonio to provide programming within the schools. And so when the pandemic first hit, it was during spring break, and we all thought that we were going to get an extra week off, and be able to just kind of hang out for a week and then we'll be back to normal. And as we all clearly know now, that was not the case. And we quickly had to figure out, how are we going to continue to live out our mission? How are we going to continue to support the communities and the families that we're supposed to be supporting? We have people that have been we have families that have been part of our clubhouses for generations. And so we really build strong connections with the kids that we serve, with their families. Just like you said, you came to the Boys and Girls Clubs when it was the boys clubs, right? We have people who their parents came and now they work for us. And so it's really strong connections within our community. So we started reaching out. I mean, we started phone call after phone call, reaching out to every single family that we serve, asking them what their needs were. And the results, the feedback was scary because they need vital, basic necessities is what they needed. They needed food. They needed help with rent. They needed safe places for their kids to go. they needed formula and diapers and, all of those things that many of us are, very lucky and fortunate to take for granted at times. And so we partnered with the food bank, who we've been partnering with for many years, and we were able to provide food to our families, both curbside lunches, but also pallets of produce. And we were also able to, because remember at that time, schools were just trying to figure out how to do this virtual learning. And so everybody was scrambling to try and figure out how do we continue education during this stay-at-home time. And so we did online homework assistance with our kids. We did care packages for our families with basic necessities and with programming opportunities in there for kids to do at home with all the supplies that they would need to keep themselves engaged in a fun activity at home, to just be a kid. And so we did all of that until we were able to open our doors back up.
When did y'all do that?
During the summertime. So we were one of the first youth serving organizations in San Antonio to open our doors after COVID hit. And so we really took our time to go through CDC guidelines to make sure that we were going to be able to do it in a safe manner, to keep all of our kids safe, to keep all of our staff safe. And then once we were secure with knowing that, okay, we can really do this and do it in a safe way, we opened our doors and it looked a lot different. We served a lot less kids because of social distancing. And there were a lot more specific parameters in place. There were no more fun field trips. We now do curbside pickup and drop off. And so it was a scary time, to be open, especially for our staff who it was important for them to be there for their kids, our kids that we serve. And it was obviously important for them to have a job and to get a paycheck, but it was also scary because this is the first time that, they've been around other people. So we went through that. And then at the end of the summer, we sent out a survey to all of our families asking, what do you need? What are your plans for the school year? How do you see yourself figuring out this educational piece for your family for this fall? And how do you need the Boys and Girls Clubs to support you? And the overwhelming response was that we need a safe place to send our kids so that we can work, so that we can provide for our families. So the large majority of the communities that we serve, they are not in a position where they can work from home. That's a luxury, and not a lot of families can do that. So they were asking us, how can you help us keep our kids safe during the day so that we can go to work, so we can feed our families? So that's exactly what we did. We decided that we were going to commit to providing that support to our communities. And for the first time in our history, we are open for full day programming for virtual learning support for kids in San Antonio. So kids come to our clubhouses and they come with the technology that they were provided by their school district. And we have small groups of kids who come and we help them with their virtual learning during the school day. And then after the school day, we then do our traditional Boys and Girls Clubs programming. We have social emotional learning programming to kind of help kids deal with the changes and the trauma that's associated with the changes that have occurred because of the pandemic. And then also, just fun activities for kids to be kids. I think that's a big piece of this for children, is that they are still kids and they do still need to have fun. They do still need to have connections with other kids and with positive adult mentors. And so the families have been extremely grateful. We get pan dulce and muffins and little fun goodies from our families all the time, because they're just so overwhelmingly grateful that we are here to help them through this time.
Are you at a ceiling? Are you maxed out?
Well, it's a revolving type of situation, because all the districts are trying to figure out what they're going to do for the rest of the school year. So they're trying to decide, when they're going to allow more kids to come and at what time throughout the school year. So we're doing monthly membership right now to kind of figure that out as the school districts figure it out. So we do have some spots available, and that will change as districts bring more kids back.
So Andrea Figueroa, Executive Director of the Martinez Street Women's Center, I'm sure you heard a lot of stuff that's very familiar to you, but as you are dealing with, you're providing a very special type of safe space for young women who are dealing with a lot of challenges, and many times they have been impacted in a specific way through what's happening with COVID and the shutdown and other stressors that are hitting families, and young women and the families sometimes become the focus of a lot of that stress. They need a place to go that is safe. Can you talk about what's happening at the Martinez Street Women's Center?
Sure. Thanks so much again for having us. So some of the listeners here today might not know a whole lot about Martinez Street Women's Center. So I'll start with that. We've been around for about 22 years, and we started off on the east side, and now we have a service center on the west side as well. And then we also serve folks on the south side and through the urban corridor. So we're a center for women and girls. We provide community health services. We provide youth development programs and opportunities for advocacy for women and girls of color. So we have two separate programs. One is a community health program. One is a Girls Zone program. Now, both of these programs generally work hand in hand. We want the youth in our programs to know that they have support systems in community health if they need, their families have needs. And when we have women in our community health program that have youth, we want to make sure that they have the opportunities to be part of our youth program as well. So what we have seen through this pandemic, and like the other panelists were talking about, we have families who generally are some of the most resilient families, I would say. When we talk about asset-based, they know how to survive. They know how to find resources to put food on their table, even when things are challenging. Because there are organizations like here that is sitting around this panel that are going to offer support without judgment. People are going to have their dignity. They're going to know that they can have a helping hand, and that it's okay to ask for help, number one. And yet we see what this pandemic has shown us is that those systemic issues in San Antonio and around the country have really been exacerbated and or brought to light in a way that we can't ignore now. So the women and girls that come to us, we want to make sure that we're giving them educational opportunities through our youth development programs, make sure that basic needs are met, and also allow them the opportunity to speak into the processes, speak into their community, speak into the systems around them that they can actually change right now as a young person. They don't have to wait until they're 18. They don't have to wait until they can vote, that they actually have the power of their own voice right now. And so, throughout this pandemic, it's been very difficult for us. We went to online as well, programming. And so with online programming, it's very different. We all pivoted, we all moved, we thought on our feet. We thought, how creative can we be to be able to serve the same families? And, one of the things that you touched on earlier was that students are being lost in the system. And that is no different, I think, for some of us, for some of our organizations. Some of us we have great built relationships over the years, and yet we have families that are unable to engage, either because they don't have access to internet, they don't have technology, they're worried and working and trying to do the best that they can. And so we people were saying earlier, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we were making phone calls to all of our families. We were reaching out and making sure that they knew we were still here if they needed anything. And those trusted and built relationships are paying off because they are coming back to us and are asking, number one, for the services that we have and are engaging in our youth development programs with their girls.
So you have a area of restorative justice at the Martinez Street. How does that work? How does that play a role in helping the children find success?
So thank you for mentioning that. Our restorative justice program is in relationship. When we talk about restorative justice, we are talking about teaching ourselves, parents, teachers, educators, administrators, that how to be in relationship with students in a different way, number one. We're teaching students how to be in relationship different with each other and to rethink the way that we, outside of the box of discipline, right? So instead of thinking about discipline in a way of punishment, instead we're talking about how can we make the harm that was committed, right? How can we have accountability between two parties, between two students, between two people in our community, and make sure that those rights, if those wrongs are addressed and that accountability is taken from whoever the harm was done, but also make sure that we're not essentially banishing people, right? We're not sending people and making people the students not be able to attend school, where they're actually more at risk for things happening in their lives or doing some sort of risky behavior. Instead, that we're really putting our arms around them and enveloping them in a community and saying, something was wrong. This is what happened. Can you take accountability for this? How can we prepare you for the future? And we're still going to be here because you are part of this community. You are not going to be sent somewhere. You are not going to be, sent through that pipeline to where, that definitely will hurt you in the future. But we're going to wrap our arms around you, and you are here to stay. You are part of this community. So that is what we're trying to do, along with American Indians of Texas, along with a lot of other organizations here in San Antonio that are part of the My Brother's Keeper collective impact. And so there's a lot of us working on this together. So that is just our one piece of this big collaborative around San Antonio.
I have an email question from Andrea, and maybe you can answer it for us, Patricia Mejia from the San Antonio Area Foundation. I worked for 32 years as a bilingual early childhood educator on the west side of San Antonio. I've always been very struck by the pronounced segregation of class and race in this city. Every child should be able to play and learn among the most diverse groups of peers possible. How can education be equitable if we maintain this level of economic segregation? Why do we have so many school districts? That last question, that's a loaded question, but can you get to sort of what Andrea is getting at, Patricia, about the issues of San Antonio's economic and therefore racial segregation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent question, and I'm sure so many of the panelists can also contribute to it. I feel like we have a little bit of a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I think we pride ourselves in being such a welcoming, vibrant community, and that's true. But I think that's prevented us from really looking at the hard realities, and that's a choice, right? We can have that ignorance if we choose to. You could live in one side of town and have no clue the disparities that exist in another side. And for me, I think I can only speak to what I believe our role is in philanthropy. And in philanthropy, I feel like our role is to really host conversations, bring other folks along who, for whatever reason, have not been able to experience the differences. I know that at one time there was a former city manager who took his new team members throughout the city, and he wanted to show what was the difference between a house on the east side versus someone on the west. And it's such a simple concept, but I think you really can be in this city and not understand the other unless you've experienced it. And so for us, our hope is to continue to host conversations to begin to heal some of that, because as the question said, there's folks who have spent their life dedicated to equity, and still they've seen very, very little movement. And I think now is a new time for us to really, I just come at it differently and allow that space that history has provided us to not only see the difference, but to create paths for us to actually change that through policy. And as a philanthropist, I want to make sure that we're hosting forums to push policy, not just to talk about it and to say these are two different realities, but then to use these very brilliant women to then to create the structural changes that we need.
So as we talk about youth success, I want to try and really kind of draw focus on what success looks like and what it doesn't look like. It doesn't have to be material success. To me, it's being able to, being able to love and being able to accept love, being able to have a stable family relationship, whatever that might look like, whatever, whoever's in your family, how you build it, it's up to you. But it's someplace that you feel valued, you feel worth in your community, and respect is at the center of all of that. And so I'm wondering, Karla Aguilar, at where you are, with the American Indians of Texas, at the Spanish colonial missions, with so much history and cultural awareness that needs to be, it needs to be right there in front of us as we talk about these issues. How does youth success, being able to accomplish these goals, it's not easy. It sounds simple, but it's not, especially when you come from an area with a lot of multi-generational trauma. How do you get to that point?
Right. I think your definition of what a successful person, a successful young person, is on. I would add on particularly the freedom to be able to have agency over your imagination and really be able to, because the world is changing so much in our lifetime. Everything that we've known up until now through the 21st century is going to radically be different than when we come back on the outside of this pandemic. And being able to engage in our imagination about how do we want to do things differently is really important. And we need to create spaces to be able to hear from young people that their imagination then their ability to change what's around them actually belongs to them. In order to be able to get to that point, I think you underscored the multi-generational trauma and how is it that we access that, right? Because it's for many families, that there's the intergenerational trauma that's inherited. It's really complex. We don't even know what it is. For some people, they may have never experienced a family picnic where there wasn't alcohol or drugs involved, for example, or that there may be other scenarios where people may have a series of limitations and may not know how to be able to define what that love looks like on a very basic level, and there's a lot of inhibitors there. But where do we access the tools to be able to learn how to name that trauma and be able to unpack it and connect it, right? So our healing approach looks a lot of ways, right? I said la cultura cura. And so the rerouting in the culture that I mentioned before is one component. But another tangible component that I think is also really important that, was mentioned was about restorative justice approaches, which when, as a segue as well from what Patricia had mentioned, is that we want to be able to come up with concrete, alternative, viable solutions for the scenarios that we see in our schools and in our neighborhoods, because those thousands of young people that you mentioned earlier, David, they're in our neighborhoods, and with a trajectory of a punitive approach towards young people and criminalization of young people, hope that we don't see on the horizon an increase in arrests and activity in the municipal court and juvenile divisions and through Bexar County. That's another stat I think would be important for people to pay attention to. And what we're proposing, what we're seeking to create, the avenue that we're creating in order to be able to get to that youth success are these restorative justice models, or what is now being called restorative justice, because that philosophy of righting the harm, of finding cohesion, of healing a situation instead of casting somebody out is very at the core of a lot of our indigenous values, right? That we find a way of being able to integrate the healing of that relative of ours so that we can learn from that and everyone is better from it, right? So, for example, spaces where youth are able to hear one another and to process situations like happen in the círculo, in the healing circle environments that we implement through our peace rooms. Like we piloted a peace room at Sam Houston High School at the beginning of last year as a way of being able to create avenues for healing for those students at that 9th grade center so that they would be able to understand those concepts that you listed about the determinants of youth success. And I want to mention that our success rate there is really indicative of what youth are actually needing, right? Is to be able to be heard, validated, sharing with one another, processing solutions, and be able to right harms instead of going into a violent solution. So in the previous school year, in that first 9 weeks, that school had 47 fights. And through in the school, actually there were 17 physical alterations, right, that are actually physical scenarios. And after that, we instituted the peace room, a restorative justice strategy that allowed training for staff, administrators, and a space for young people to be able to process family traumas, things that were happening in their personal lives. That it went from 17 physical altercations in the first 9 weeks of the previous school year to just one, just by being able to have an avenue. How many of those 17 youth that were in a fight that previous school year ended up going to potentially being incarcerated and spinning out without additional resources to be able to bring that young person back into the circle? And so our ancestral knowledge is giving us the tools and the wherewithal to be able to implement these healing spaces, which augment and define that success for young people, creating a space for them to define that on their own terms. And it's wildly successful, and we hope that as all of these policing conversations are happening across our city and how school budgets are determining their priorities, that we can take the same desire to reprioritize healing in the forefront rather than continuing down a pathway of punitive solutions that aren't really solving anything in our schools and in our households.
So Andrea Figueroa at the Martinez Street Women's Center, as you help young women and girls deal with trying to come up with an identity that will work for them in a world that is trying to impose identity on them, frequently hypersexualized, exploitative, and demeaning. But it's all the bling in the world that's being put in front of them. I mean, how do you help them find an area of success that will bring them to a point where they can find love and accept love and be fully actualized individuals with all this other stuff that's happening in this world in COVID? That's a lot. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, that was a big question. So yeah, and so the challenges that our girls have now are quite I would say exacerbated now, right, in the world that we live in. And just, a little bit of background, like our Girls Zone program is based around social justice, the 6 elements of social justice. So the way that that works is that that first element of social justice is actually self-love and self-knowledge. So we start with our very young girls, the youngest girls at age 8, talking about, you know, who are you? We want to know who you are. You tell us, and we're going to listen. And, you know, we talk about the media, we talk about images, we talk about all of these things that girls are bombarded with as well. And what we want to know is, you tell me how these things are affecting you. Tell me how they're affecting you. And then let's figure out, like, what are your passions? What is something that you love about your community? What are the things that you want to be fixed in your community? What are the ways that you can actually make a difference? And as girls start to grow and they start to learn about who they are and they start to learn about their passions, then many times, and what we hope for is that the noise from the outside starts getting less and less, and that their voice on the inside becomes stronger and stronger, so that they can make a difference in their own families, so that they can make a difference in their communities, and so that they can grow up and be a self-actualized person where they actually understand their gifts first and know that those gifts can be used to the betterment of the people and the family around them. So yes, are there a lot of external pressures on girls? Are there a lot of internal pressures or pressures inside the home on girls? Yes, because we do find that some of our girls have to then help out and be, the extra caretaker for their younger siblings. And so we know that girls have stressors that need to be addressed. And so we also have circles and things of that nature, so that girls can learn to talk about those things, can learn to process what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're feeling. And they're going to be in a circle of trusted adults that are going to listen to them and are going to be there for them. And so that's how we do things at the center.
Yeah, so when a young girl at the center is working through that, is there an awareness? Do they have an awareness of their value as an individual? I mean, that this if they can get this right, that they will gain so much.
So I think that this is what I think. I think that we as adults oftentimes don't give young people the credit or enough credit to know that they know themselves pretty well, and that they generally just don't have a way to express that. They know what their likes are, they know what their dislikes are, they know what makes them angry or those types of things. And we as trusted adults need to be there to guide them in learning how to express those things in a healthy way. And that's so, yes, I do think that, Karla talked about trauma. So we definitely have girls that have trauma in their lives, and we need to be trusted adults that make sure that not only do they have a place to express those things, but that us as adults know that if there is something that we cannot provide, or there is some sort of resource beyond what we can provide, that we then can provide those resources in a different way. What we've also seen through this pandemic, and I think you touched on it yesterday, was the mental health needs that students across the city, not just students in our neighborhoods, but students all across the country are having because this pandemic, because of isolation, because they are having to help around with the family. So these things are real things that kids need to talk about, and that we have to be prepared as adults to be as supportive as we possibly can.
Yeah, we are seeing an epidemic of suicide in this generation. It really needs to be addressed. I mean, this one more reason why this conversation is vital, and we need to focus attention and resources on it. But back to the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio, Ada Saenz, what do you see with the children that you work with and the families that you work with are the barriers for them to achieving success? And then, we have the typical ideas of success, and they're important, being able to graduate from high school and achieve marketable skills and being able to support themselves and a family. So what are the barriers that are keeping young people from achieving that?
So I think a lot of our families that we serve, they're kind of living in this survival mode. And so, if you're not in a safe environment, in a stable environment, being successful in school is secondary. And so I think, that's part of the equation. I also think that, so the Boys and Girls Clubs, we are about providing opportunities to youth. So it doesn't matter, you may come from a great family, you may come from a stable home, but if you don't, that's okay. That you still have a voice, you still have, you matter, and that you can still have a great future. And so we provide opportunities to kids who may not necessarily get those types of opportunities depending on their background. So we want them to, yes, college is not for everybody, but that is obviously one path, that college readiness that we prepare our kids for. But then also we have a program called Alamo Trades. And so, in San Antonio, we have a really rich trades workforce. And there are lots of opportunities in the trades in San Antonio. And so I think, letting kids know of all the different paths that are out there that they have to choose from, and letting them find meaningful work for themselves. So whatever that means to them, what is, where do you want your future to be? What type of work is meaningful for you? What's going to make you happy? Just so that they can find that fulfillment within themselves, but then also be able to have a stable life for themselves and for their future families.
So San Antonio is having that conversation now with workforce development. There'll be an issue on the November 3rd ballot that San Antonians could decide if they want to fund. But already we're seeing the city working towards trying to have workforce development. And Patricia, Mejia, at the San Antonio Area Foundation, are you looking at these programs that the city is developing for workforce development as a way that we can provide a pathway for San Antonio youth to find good jobs, good paying jobs, jobs with benefits, healthcare? These are the ways that we're able to bring people out of situations that create stress and break down families at times. Okay, no escuches. Okay, we can't hear you. No.
There we go. I was having some internet issues. I think I was muted for a little bit. It's an excellent question. I'm really proud of our leadership. Margie French served on the committee to help to come up with some of the plan that will go to the ballot. I think what's interesting for us as in philanthropy is it's very similar to what we've been describing in the conversation today, that it's not just about the training. While that's going to be so important, what I'm really proud of what's going to go to the community to vote in November is that it was, we learned from our nonprofit leaders who have been doing workforce development for such a long time that says the way that families are successful in actually completing these programs or certificates and getting into those either high wage jobs is by having the supportive services. It's not just about the training. You've got to have, if a family needs assistance with rental assistance or food assistance or childcare assistance, we really have to think holistically. And as it pertains to youth, I think there's some incredible things that we're hoping will come to the city. There's nonprofit leaders who are building relationships with national funders to see if we can do even a better job at really channeling other resources to this community to make sure that workforce development is also thought about not just as those who might have are trying to complete their degrees, but those who are just starting off, the youth. And so we're really proud of that conversation. We're hoping that everybody gets behind that. We're doing our part to let people know about it. But also we're really prepared on the back end to provide those supportive services through our nonprofit partnerships.
I have a question from a listener, John. He emailed in. The criminal justice system impacts the children of color at much higher rates than white children. These children, who are mostly Latino and African American, go to court where they are likely to develop negative attitudes about themselves and schools. Some become part of the school to prison pipeline. Is there a movement in San Antonio to use alternatives to court to specifically apply restorative justice methods to address conflict and come to effective solutions? I throw it up there. Who wants to answer the question about that? Okay, all right, Karla, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is. And thanks to the leadership of folks here in San Antonio, namely Judge John Bull and others, there have been policies at the state level that have been really concretely shifting the conversation of criminalization of youth. A couple of years ago, if a child was truant, the parent was ticketed and then sent to court. And then the parents were put into the court system, often not having the resources to be able to, navigate that situation well enough. The child is punished. They go to school even less. And then, we had our conversation with municipal court because to be able to expand our programming with them. I mentioned the Rites of Passage program earlier in the program. And so our relationship with the municipal court began as a diversion opportunity for young people when they got in trouble. They were sent to juvenile court, and so we were invited to be one of the partners of the City of San Antonio Municipal Courts by bringing our Joven Noble and Shinashli cultural rerouting curriculum, which is healing centered, healing informed, and implementing what we call these restorative justice strategies. We had such wonderful success with those young people that every year the number of youth that we were serving through municipal court kept getting higher and higher. So the success of this healing-centered approach has been part of what is the larger conversation that Andrea mentioned about the relationship with My Brother's Keeper and the partnership and with the support of other philanthropy, allowing community-based organizations like ours that are doing this restorative justice work to help to create that vibrant movement to be able to not approach our young people in a punitive manner, but in a restorative manner. And it's a conversation that is being spearheaded by the organizations that I mentioned, but really requires parents and community members, advocates and leaders from city and county sources, and folks that are sitting on those funds to be able to actualize these solutions and push them forward. Because the statistics of the criminalization of youth of color are really, really stark. And we can't keep doing more of the same. It's causing a hemorrhage from our schools into the detention facilities.
Another email from Lionel. No single organization can create the type of large-scale systemic change San Antonio needs, nor can our shortcomings be addressed by simply expanding any individual program. What partnerships or collaborations are promising now, and what more are needed to achieve the broader community vision that we desire? Patricia Mejia at San Antonio Area Foundation. That seems to be, you're in the middle of a lot of different organizations trying to foster and help keep them going during these trying times.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I really applaud the person who sent it in. It's exactly right. Even though each of the women here are absolutely stellar and the programs that they're leading are phenomenal and changing the lives every day, we really realize that it's going to take all of us. And I know that's sometimes overused, but in this case, I truly mean not just programs. It's going to take the institutions that drive some of these inequities to really come together. I'm very proud that the Area Foundation has really supported this type of collaboration. The one that's most connected to youth success, those of you who tuned in yesterday, Excel Beyond the Bell has several, or Up Partnership has various collective impact initiatives that are connected to youth that we're very, very proud of. But what I really want to, I guess, lead with is, aside the fact that they are, or lead with, aside the fact that there are some incredible partnerships like Up, Excel Beyond the Bell, My Brother's Keeper, Our Tomorrow, all of those that are happening, we really need to still continue to build the partnerships that are private and public. Those who may not necessarily see them directly connected to youth, but really, investment in youth is an investment in our economy, and we need to begin to help others who don't necessarily see their work to be youth connected. We've got to begin to build those bridges, and I hope that forums like this will continue to do that, but we have some work to do.
So I'm sure that all of y'all have dealt with when you have someone come through the door and they see what you do and they say, I wish I had heard about you 5 years ago or 10 years ago for my other kid or whatever. And there's this discovery that happens, and when you do make that connection, they work out and it's great. But there's lost time. I mean, it seems like there are a lot of families out there that just don't know that there's help out there for them. And so maybe we could go around to each of y'all. We'll start with Karla. How do people get in contact with you? Who is eligible for help?
Great, thank you, David. I was just jotting down some resources that I think would be beneficial for folks. The circles that we have for young people, we also have them for adults, and they're actually all generations. So we have monthly healing circles that are open to everyone, and folks can find out about those healing circles by going to our website at aitscm.org. Folks can also easily look us up on Facebook by looking up American Indians in Texas on Instagram and Twitter. And we have so many different things going on. Our COVID response team is also there for folks that are seeking care packs or additional support that way, or volunteering. We also welcome mentors to be a part of our compadres and comadres network, to be supportive for young people, and also give us a call at 210-227-4940.
Ada Saenz, thank you. Ada Saenz at Boys and Girls Club. Who qualifies? Who can go in there? How open are your doors?
They are wide open. We serve any child age 6 to 18. And the best way to get a hold of us would be to go to our website, which is www.begreatsa.org. So it's begreatsa.org. Or you can call our main line. It's 210-436-0686. And we can get you connected to the traditional clubhouse or the extended day program that's in our schools closest to you.
And Andrea Figueroa at the Martinez Street Women's Center. What range of services do y'all provide? Who qualifies?
All right, so we are a women's center, but we serve all families that come to our door. We just want to make that clear. So we do have community circles as well. Right now they're online, and you can find that basic needs assistance. You can find the link to our Girls Zone program, to our asset-based parent education and family violence prevention services. You can find those on mswomencenter.org, or you can give us a phone call at 210-908-9772. Or, like everyone else said, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on all of those platforms, so just look for Martinez Street Women's Center and we will definitely pop.
Now that brings us to a close, and I want to thank all of y'all for coming on with us today online to have this conversation, joining us for this second of 4 community conversations centered on San Antonio's Area Foundation's 4 impact areas: living and resilient communities, livable and resilient communities, youth success, successful aging, and cultural vibrancy. Join us on December 3rd and 4th when we address how to support safe and successful aging. These vital conversations were made possible by the John L. Santikos Charitable Foundation, a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. I'm David Martin Davies with Texas Public Radio. Thanks for checking us out.